Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Nikki Westcombe. We are the founders of Nexus Performance. Joining us on this wild ride is our heavyweight coaching team, ready to unleash their expertise to solve any problems in your journey to getting strong and jacked.
Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way.
So pump up the volume and let's get into this.
Today we're talking about a topic that has never been spoken about before.
Ever.
Technique. And not just technique, though. We are going to bring a slightly different view to it. We're going to talk about especially from the aspect of coaching technique online.
Yes.
And a little bit of the more, I guess, nuances that come with that.
Yep.
Differences to in-person. We both have a lot of background in both worlds, have been in both worlds, know the pros and cons of both worlds, understand that there are limitations and certain people do better with different ones and everything about it. So I thought, hey, it's worth having a discussion on it. But first, before we get to that, let's just go into a little bit about just technique and what technique is.
Yep.
Because before we get to like how we would coach technique online, obviously we've got to have some sort of target as to like what technique is.
Yes.
To start off in general,
and how we would define it. I guess not specifically, but more or less have it. So it's not just like, so you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, to a degree, for sure, because there are lots of different viewpoints on technique out there, and I don't want to spend a whole thing talking about this because we've done different things on it before, but for the strength, just people that are doing it as part of their sport or doing it as part of just to get bigger,
yep,
or things
just
like
general
that,
trainees,
or the people that are doing it for powerlifting, for Olympic lifting, for any other reason. There's going to be different techniques that are used for those things that are all correct and that all have validity in their world. We have people that are going to squat ass to grass and people that are going to squat maybe to a box or with this implement or that implement and the weight in different positions and lots of different things, and they would all be valid.
Yes.
They would all have their place. They would all have their person that it would fit.
And then you'll always have the internet warriors being like, that's wrong.
Of course, as well. Yeah. And sometimes they are right it's
just the context.
Context on the internet is hard to come by.
Absolutely.
Because
you mentioned it already in there. Obviously, there is a difference between quote unquote strength sports and strength, like people training strength for their sport.
Yep. Or for any reason.
For any reason, yeah. But there is a difference like between the two, obviously, with relation to strength sports, i.e. powerlifting, strongman, Olympic weightlifting. They have
anything where the training is the sport.
Yes, yeah.
As opposed to I'm doing this training for my sport and it's different. Like I'm not.
Like a basketball player doing strength is vastly different to a powerlifter doing strength.
Yep,
they're two different things. However, they're both still training strength,
and they're both still going to like technique. The little details are a little bit more important for somebody in which it is their sport.
Mm-hmm.
The world we're in, powerlifting, strength sports, for the most part, is a little bit more nitty gritty. A little bit more little things are going to have more, going to be more useful, I guess. And worry about the 1%ers a little bit more. Just like a basketballer, you said, is going to worry about their little things in their technique of shooting a ball.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
That's fucking really important to them.
Yeah.
Because like that's literally their game.
Yeah.
That's what they do. That's what they get paid for.
Fuck about squatting.
And could care less about squatting. Their strength coach probably does, but he's well down the list. But he's still going to be looking for technique when they are doing squats or whatever exercise that you're doing. To some degree, he probably just doesn't care as much because he's probably picking variations that are suited. I guess he's not saying load up 1RM low bar back squat with wraps and you start
hope not.
Banging some reps,
You'd really hope not.
Yeah. So just a very brief overview on the fact that technique is different and there's different viewpoints. we're all biased in some way.
Yes.
I'm going to look at somebody's squat and I'm going to view it through somewhat of a powerlifting lens. I've learned over the years and through experience that I've got to try and remove that a little bit and have a bit more of an understanding of where they're at and what they want to achieve when I critique somebody's technique. I'm not just going to apply a one-size-fits-all formula, because people do have, like, people will say, like, a squat's a squat.
Yeah.
And I'm just not, like, I think there's general rules for a squat, like, hey, you should probably brace and you should put the bar, like, on your back.
The squat
like,
pattern itself, I think, is a very generalized thing.
Yeah, but
the way in which you're using that squat pattern is vastly
how
different.
you set it up.
An Olympic weightlifter, they're going to sit ass to grass. They physically have to.
They're probably not going to say super duper tight.
No.
They're not going to, like...
They're a little bit more fluid in their movement.
Yeah, because it's not a true max to them.
No.
There's a lot of things. Same with the sports guy. Like, there's going to be things that I do if I'm coaching somebody like that to squat that sets them up, makes it a little less risky, but still improves general strength. Or maybe it's going to be somebody that is really tall and has a really bad, like, back squat pattern, natural, just through how they're built. But guess what? It's not their sport, so I'm going to choose a different exercise or a different squat that suits them a little bit more.
Yep.
And focus on the technique like that. So technique alters a lot through the variations in which you use to load it. Where the weight is, as in, like, out in front of you, like a goblet squat or front squat or safety bar squat, and then a low bar, high bar, back squat, low bar, back squat, and the millions of little variations of those things.
Everything in between. That
are out there as well. Before we go into the how a little bit more, actually, no, let's just cap on one more thing before we go there and just talk a little bit more on powerlifting technique and what we're looking for.
Yes.
Because although we've kind of, in a roundabout way, said that all squats are beautiful, we love them all.
Yeah, we love everything.
we're not, in political sense, we love all squats, but we really love powerlifting squats.
Yeah, they're our favorite type of squat.
Yeah.
Because we know what we're looking for. We know what the outcome goal is. We know what they want to achieve. We're only a little bit biased.
But, and there's as I said, there's some inherent little differences that we're looking at. And it's not just the person that we're looking for and what suits them best. We're definitely going to take that on board when it comes to building overall strength and programming in a total all-round sense in making them just a better human or athlete.
Yeah.
But as a powerlifter, you've chosen to do a sport
that has specific rules.
It has rules, and you have to follow them whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And not only that, but, like, you're trying to get the most out of those roles, which puts another set of constraints on the technique application from our point of view. As in, like, I'm generally a fan of squatting as deep as you possibly can for 99% of people.
Yep.
But when powerlifters are out there and they're trying to compete at that upper echelon level during a prep, it's not to say that we don't use other variations and we have a slightly different rule set for them, but we're going to use a slightly wider foot stance. We're going to use a low bar position.
Yep.
We're going to use these sorts of things.
Probably going to use wraps for some people as well.
Whatever that, yeah. But we're going to use these things to mold their technique into what we want it to be, which means that we just have to pass depth to get the white lights in competition. Any deeper could be seen as a waste of energy, as a waste of, like, you might be just using too much,
losing a couple kilos,
which could be the difference between first and second, or second.
Absolutely.
It's comps are 1 on 2.5 kilos. So all those little things make a big difference that wouldn't be applicable in other realms of squatting typically. So yeah, the technique that we're cueing, the technique that we're implementing through various methods is also rounded upon the goal, in which case in powerlifting is squatting just to depth, making sure that we're ticking that box, but still doing it in a way that allows us to put the most weight on the bar.
Yeah, bench, making sure the bar pauses on the chest, get the call, etc. Like, not just bouncing it off the chest and pressing straight up.
Yeah, because you could do more weight that way.
Absolutely,
but it wouldn't be, it wouldn't it wouldn't work for the sport. Or we're
No.
going to use a wide grip and a big arch that everybody in the internet hates, but that's the sport.
Yeah.
Like
and
to
then you
those
see-
guys, that's the wrong technique.
Yeah.
But again, this is where context comes in. They're wrong in this instance
Yeah.
because it's just the fucking way that we bend the rules of the sport to our advantage, which is literally is what sports is.
That's how sports is. It's no different to, I remember maybe it was like 18 months ago, 2 years ago, Hawthorn AFL Club put up a video of their boys in the gym, and it was like a bench press off or something.
Yeah.
And it was the most, from a powerlifting perspective, like dog shit, disgusting thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, bounce.
But they didn't
reps.
care. They were just, their feet were barely on the floor. They're bouncing it off the chest.
I'm sure they did care to some
It
degree.
was to a degree, yeah. They weren't
just.
just, they absolutely weren't fucking themselves up. It was a preseason thing. It was a bit of fun. Like the boys were just getting around it.
Yeah.
But in terms of like from an efficiency standpoint, which is how we look at technique.
Yeah, if you were looking at it from a powerlifting lens,
powerlifting efficiency and to the rules, you'd be like, what is that? But for them, that was fine because that's not their sport.
Mm-hmm.
If they probably look at some of the things we do and they're like, why the hell would you do that? And it's like, yep, that makes sense because you guys need to be robust and athletic and jump and run and land and whatever else.
Yeah.
We just stand in the one spot for pretty much most of our sport.
Yeah. There's and if you look at the people who are doing the sports, it's clear that there's
vastly different body shapes.
Well,
yeah. You hope so anyway.
Different goals. Before we get to the how, when were you introduced into the idea of technique? Because I feel like as a kid, there's a technique to everything, right? Like if you're going to jump out of a tree or some shit, like there's a technique to do that efficiently.
Yeah, I used to do parkour.
As a kid, yeah, so you would know. But as a kid or whatever, you just do shit and
you just
then
throw yourself off shit.
You just you learn through doing. You learn through making mistakes. You learn through well, fuck, that hurt a little bit. I'm going to learn differently next time. Or
It's actually really funny that you bring it up in that sense because I guess I played AFL from 3 years old, so we're always taught this is how you handball, this is how you kick, etc.
Yeah.
But from even using that as an example, we used to live on 5 acres where I grew up in Melbourne, and we had a carport and a trampoline, and we'd always beg our mum to put our trampoline next to our carport so we could jump off the carport onto the trampoline. It was really fun. So she wouldn't let us move the trampoline there. So my brother and me just had the brainiac idea to just jump off the carport and land on the ground.
Smart.
Just you're a kid, you can do this stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it's why my knees are cooked now.
Bounce.
But we'll never know. But it wasn't until I started to get into parkour, free running, etc., where I learned, when you land, you're actually supposed to roll.
Yeah.
And the way in which they roll is like a specific technique. Like you kind of go over one shoulder to a degree because you're not just like landing and throwing your shoulder into the ground and hoping for the best because that's not going to end well either. But that would be I guess, quote unquote, where I was first introduced to the idea of a specific technique to something to have a more advantageous outcome. But from a strength training perspective, I would have been maybe 14, 15 when we were doing sports excellence in the gym, and we were taught sports excellence, taught how to squat with a broomstick. Yeah. So from a strength training perspective, I guess
you're not allowed to go heavy in the broomstick until you have literally perfect technique.
No, I had DOMs for a week. It was a broomstick.
Yeah.
You'd think I can stand and sit from a chair pretty comfortably. Throw a broomstick on me back? Nah, I was out.
How many reps do you do?
I don't know, heaps.
A bazillion.
50 to 100 minimum.
Yeah, nice.
Just squats on squats on squats. It was all the boys. There was some had broomsticks, some had do you remember those bouncy sort of poles that they can use to run around stuff, agility stuff? Some of the boys just had those on their back just to give you some sort of idea about a posterior loading
on you. Yeah.
And we were just
not
that there was no loading to it, but that's how we were taught.
Yeah.
And it was just essentially sit down, stand up.
Because there's coaches out there that'll say technique aficionados that are just perfectionists.
Yes.
They want to be you're not allowed to do anything past a broomstick or whatever until you can do it correctly.
Well, we weren't allowed to use the school gym as a part of sport until we could do 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups in a row unbroken.
Really?
Yep. That was the rules.
What's that teach you though?
No idea. I think it was more of just
because that doesn't gatekeep.
No,
much.
But it wasn't really that hard. I was like, oh, okay. and just did it when I was like 12.
Yeah, but even if you can, it doesn't mean that you are
it.
better than the kid who can't, and that you will have better technique or
no, absolutely
obey the rules
not.
more.
No,
That's
I think it was
rule.
just the most bare basic entry point they could set. And even then, like, we were only ever allowed to do it when we were in either sports excellence or PE extension.
Yeah.
They were the only people allowed to use the gym.
When supervised or?
Supervised, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we weren't ever allowed in there on our own.
Yeah. That wouldn't be very good in school.
No. Imagine a bunch of like 12-year-olds in a school gym by themselves.
What cues or like technique advice were you given, or was it just like get the broomstick or do 100 reps and see what happens?
Just sit down, stand up. But it was essentially that, yeah. It was just move. The teacher, like the Mrs. Newman at the time, she was.
Mrs. Newman that I look jacked as fuck.
Yeah, she was jacked. She was. She's like the AFL coordinator for Queensland women's now.
Fuck, this school's
she's a weapon. Yeah. Like, we've had some pretty good people coming through our school.
Not my school.
But this is like a Townsville public school, so like it's not. We don't set the benchmark high, but we had some phenomenal teachers and stuff.
Shout out.
Yeah, thanks, Apes, Willie Ross. But yeah, so I guess now looking back at it, her ideal and her goal from it was not to teach us how to squat, but get us more familiarized with that pattern before we progressed into like the actual gym and using barbells and dumbbells and things like that.
Whatever
implement they had at the time,
whatever the next thing was. Or maybe it was even just to follow a plan to some degree.
Yeah, it was. I think it was quite a few things, because by the time I got to grade 11 and 12, she'd assigned. So she was also like, she was our vice principal. She was also one of the PE teachers, and she was also the AFL coach.
Yeah.
So she was everything. Like, she was a weapon. And so she would, on a Tuesday and Wednesday morning every fortnight, we would have to do like part of our rhinos training, which is what the sports excellence program was called, was we would go into the gym in the morning and just run through like a very basic small program. So she'd be like, okay, guys, this week you've got just a leg circuit.
Yeah.
It'd be like 50 squats total, 50 push-ups, 50 chin-ups, like whatever it might be, you know?
Yeah.
And you just run through that. And that was like, I guess, your first introduction to a program.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then through grade 12...
It's like school in general just teaches you how to learn. Like, it sets you up to learn.
Well, it was that. And then as a part of that, so that was grade 11, or like 10, 11, 12. And then through grade 11 and 12, I was in PE extension. And one of our major final assessments was at the start of one term, we had to pick an athletic sport, like an athletic event that wasn't sprinting. And we essentially had to set testing.
Yeah.
So we'd go and do it. I chose long jump at the time because I really enjoyed long jump and sprinting, but we couldn't do sprinting. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just go do this.
Yeah.
So we had to choose the sport. We had to then go and research all about it.
Yep.
About what the goal is, what the outcome measure is, etc. We had to put our own plan in place. So the teacher had no input whatsoever to improve. So we had to set a goal, and we had to take ourselves from point A to point B based on our program. And whether you achieved your goal or not, you could still like get straight A's, because it was more or less about the plan, about the thought process behind it. Like, you had to justify your understanding as to why you chose this, what this was trying to achieve, etc. Did you achieve the goal? Okay, maybe not, but could you have? Potentially, who knows?
Yeah, it's that methodology.
Yeah, exactly. That was more or less like the first exposure to where I had to actually think about something like that.
Yeah.
Which was actually, like, now that I think back to it, I'm like, fuck, that was really cool for school. Oh, that's sick. Like, that's something that's actually really fun.
Yeah, because then you
practical.
Go, when you start, you probably started there, as in like it's just a bit of an experiment with maybe not a lot of knowledge behind it, but a plan. Like planning is the fucking key there. And then you go through uni, or you start reading like shit on the internet, and like you get really nitty gritty, and you're like, fuck, there's like all these little things have to be perfect and stuff like that. And then after you do it for a decade, you realize like, fuck, I should just go back to that first one again and just.
It's almost like
just have a general plan, but maybe now with a little bit more knowledge. Well, I hope a bit more knowledge behind it, and a little bit, less mistakes.
Yeah,
it's still a little bit
much.
Yeah, still a little bit like that though.
Second guessing,
as long as the plan makes sense. Yeah, my God, I mean, I wish I had a school program like that, but I played every sport growing up through different track and field type stuff, football, taekwondo, touch, all that stuff. But I don't think we threw out any of that at all. We did any sort of like weight training or anything that was about like technique in the weight room anyway. There's a lot of technique, obviously, like on the field or running or throwing or whatever we were doing. But I didn't really get into the weight room until much later at all. I was strong through just being through doing all those sports and learning how to move, I guess, other people.
Yeah.
And how to move myself through space, especially in like Taekwondo and stuff, because you're like jumping and spinning and fucking whatever the hell you do there. But yeah, the weights room didn't come until much later. Much later, as in like I was in the Navy by that point, and people have heard that story before. And I remember like my mate trying to show me how to squat, but it was like just literally grab a bar, and he taught me more from a powerlifting lens almost from the start, because he had a little bit of a powerlifting background and had trained with like Marcus McCopoulos down in at PTC, the original, and PTC was literally Marcus's garage. So he had that background. So he had, I would say, a pretty good head. Like I had a pretty good head start having that guy in powerlifting anyway. Having my mate who had Michael show him as the first point of entry into squatting and deadlifting. Like it was probably better advice than what most people do when they go in, or when they But I still don't remember us like having a huge amount of like. He kind of gave me some tips and said, don't do the real dumb shit, but that was about as far as our technique went. The rest was just like go hard and like just go to failure on everything and just annihilate yourself in the gym. And it was more of a game between us after who could go harder, I would say. So there wasn't a lot of technique involved. And then it wasn't until I had my first like probably bodybuilding coaches where they started to say do stuff. But even then it wasn't, it's bodybuilding. So it's just more like I was watching YouTube videos and learning from that. And then the first from a coach would have been when I started powerlifting through Mel and Thomas and a couple of my earlier coaches there. So, and when they came in, it was almost like an aha moment, because I was like, oh, there's more to like just what your teacher said. That was like kind of sit down, which is pretty much what I'd been doing. I've developed a really good base from just watching generalist YouTube videos on how to squat and stuff like that. I think I squatted probably 200 or 210, maybe 220 before I and everybody's seen the deadlift videos from my bodybuilding days. So, I mean, before I built a really good base through what I would say not being heavily coached on technique in bodybuilding, and just kind of like following a decent program from before having formal technique, like deeper analysis. Yeah. So it shows like you can get a long way and do a lot of good with just like quote unquote good enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm fairly similar in that front in terms of like, we had a little bit of an intro when I was 15 and that was it. We pretty much never progressed from the broomstick, but
you weren't good enough.
Nah. Then from there on, once I actually started getting into the gym at about 19 properly, I didn't have really any formal teaching. Like I had coaches and stuff, and I had a nutrition coach who also provided me a program, but I kind of just ran my own program and did whatever I wanted to do. And then it wasn't until I did get one coach and he started teaching me a fair bit about technique. He was very bodybuilder focused as well, but he was quite general in everything. So he sort of started to piece some things together for me, and I started to create like a foundation similar to you. You'd watch some YouTube videos on like how to squat, how to do this, how to low bar, etc. And then learning off some of the boys at Hold Your Own when that was around, and sort of like adopting a couple of the things I'd been told, a couple of the things they were doing, and molding it together, but never distinctly going and like working with the coach and be like, okay, I want to do this better, until I started with you. Yeah. And we rocked up to the garage and you were like, yep, don't do that. But like in a good way, but constructive and like,
of course,
an actual deeper understanding. And I was like,
I feel like there's so much value in just doing shit. Like just doing reps, just doing reps.
Some people miss out on that
for years and years and years, and just like forming your own technique and like just working out what feels good. Oh, when I stand wider, it feels better. Yay. When I stand narrower, I can maybe go deeper or something. I don't know. Like you start to figure these like general things out. And if you're a little bit more dedicated and you're filming yourself and watching it back, you figure that shit out a lot quicker. Yeah. Like you see like, holy fuck, I fucked that one up. Look, but look what I did, you know, like you can start to nitpick it. And so filming it, even if you're not sending it to somebody, is a really, really good tool for self-critique. Even if you don't know exactly what you're looking for, you kind of see what felt good, and then you can correlate that with how it looks on the video. And you can, but even things like bracing, where some people, like if I coach somebody for powerlifting who just hasn't had a lot of time in the gym, maybe they're 6 months or a year into the gym, whatever, like typically like our bracing chat is like, holy shit, like you're not doing much. Having a bar on your back will make you brace inherently to some degree, because your body won't just fucking fold.
You'd hope not.
It'll cause, it'll develop some sort of stiffness towards it. So you brace in some capacity, but bracing in the right way, in the technical way, is something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. But if I get somebody who's spent 10 years in the gym, and even if it's just a bodybuilder, they haven't been shown specifically how to brace, like you'd be surprised, a lot of people figured it out a long way by that point.
Yeah, and I still have this discussion now. Like, obviously, I still work a lot more face-to-face than what you would with a lot of people in here coming through to do tech stuff. And one of the first things that we always pretty much work on is their brace. And same thing, like whether they're a brand new person or someone who's been training for 5, 6, 7, 10 years by this point, the little intricacies of like how to brace for what we specifically want.
They pick it up really quick.
Absolutely. Yeah, they do, because it's like, it's not as if you're having to teach a newborn how to do something.
Yeah.
It's something they've already sort of probably inherently just been doing without thinking about.
Yeah.
And you
tweaks.
just make a slight adjustment and they're like, wow, that changed everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, and they're like, oh, that was amazing. Like, you've done this, this, and this. I'm like, no. Like, you already had this. This was the most little, small piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And now it's what we're looking for in terms of like our outcome goal.
Yeah. Rarely am I completely throwing everything somebody's doing in the bin. And because they're probably doing it for a reason.
Yes.
If they've done enough reps. Like I said, somebody who's brand new, 6 months in, they don't know what feels good.
Yeah.
And that's why technique can be a little bit harder to them. And like specific cues, if people say like, you'll see an Instagram video where like, this is the cue for fucking squats or whatever. When you've coached enough like absolute beginners, you realize that those cues are so hit and miss and just mean nothing to a lot of people.
Yes.
Like me and you will read a cue and be like, that makes a lot of sense. They'll see those words and it'll just be like, what? What do you mean? Like,
especially when you can explain one thing 10 different ways.
Yeah.
We had that discussion this morning with the boys on the call. Like, what's the way in which you can sometimes teach upper back tension? And I think 4 of us had 4 different ways. They were all the same outcome goal. They all had the exact same thing. It's just a different lens to look at things. And it's hard because people obviously learn differently. And if you had someone who comes in, and I'll use the cue I use, for example, of like, do a lat pull down into the bar. If you have someone who's never done a lat pull down before, they're going to be like, what the fuck is that? And then you're like, but if that's all you've got, you're like,
you got no more.
Okay, now we have to go over and do lat pull down.
Yeah, just
to learn that, then we'll come back to squatting.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
That's not going to work though. So you need to know how to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but now we've kind of, in a really long sense, said that technique is varied. There's lots of different goals, different outcomes, different viewpoints, different biases, different all this stuff. So I guess the how to it is, how are we going to, before we even get to the online part, how are we going to improve somebody's technique? Like what strategies would you use coaching somebody in the gym right now to get them to improve that in technique in person? Like what are the multiple fucking tools in your toolbox that you can...
The best part about being in person is not only can you get a 360-degree view live and in the flesh, you can use cues, although sometimes it's not great to cue people through a movement. Sometimes the most minor little cue through a movement can be the big difference.
Well, cues can be given in person or online, but cues in person, you can go
there and then. Like it's happening.
Okay, I can go to you, hey, do a lap pull down the bar, and you can tell me straight away, I don't know what the fuck that means. And I'm like, all right, sweet.
Cool.
Let's do that. This. Ignore that. Let's do this other one.
Yeah.
Like straight away.
You can use touch.
Yep.
Touch is a big one.
In like showing somebody.
So you can just so you can essentially maneuver someone. You can show them yourself. So there's a lot of people who are visual learners.
Powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many different forms of learning.
Demonstration. I can demonstrate. I can go like, hey, this is how you do a squat. You go like, I can do that. And I mean, you might not be able to, but you can try.
Yeah.
Get you a bit closer.
Yeah. So in the gym, you just have so many extra tools, like face to face.
Yeah.
That unfortunately we just don't have when we're online. Online, it's fairly, you have a video from one angle.
Yeah.
That generally speaking is a couple of days to maybe a week after they've done it.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, depending on the coaching. And you don't really get a great deal of feedback from them sometimes. So they might just send you a video of their squat and say, hey, how does this look?
Yeah.
But they don't tell you whether it was like, oh, this felt good, this felt bad, I didn't like this. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Like if someone just sends you a video and they're just like, hey, here's my squat, how does it look?
Yeah.
Whereas like when you're in the gym, when someone does
and even if
set,
you ask them, like if I said, oh yeah, how did this feel? And
they're like, oh yeah, it was good.
It was like 4 days ago.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, I don't even remember, that was the other day.
Yeah.
Whereas like in the gym, they'll finish a set, you'd be like, okay, cool. 9 times out of 10, before I give any advice or cue anything, I ask them how it feels first. Because they might turn around to me and be like, oh, that was the best squat I've ever done. And if I'm already sitting there ready to like tear it apart, then and if I start doing that and in their head they're like, oh, what? I thought I did really good. It can like make a bit of a mix that we don't really want. Whereas like you get their feedback, you can provide your feedback, you guys mold it into how it actually wants to be or what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And it works.
Yeah. Because coaching you need to be, for coaching to be effective or for any relationship to be effective, there needs to be like, I need to be heard. And then there needs to be, then you can give your impact, but also be heard. And then somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a team thing.
It's an anything thing.
Yeah. Combine it.
Whenever there's two people having whether you're negotiating something or, like negotiating a hostage outcome, negotiating how much you're going to pay for a product in fucking, if you're bargaining or whether, the coaching, it's all the same stuff. There needs to be, you two need to be both on the same page as to like what the other person is looking for and for that thing to work. But anyway, that's just coaching. But yeah, technique is definitely limited online a little bit more. We don't have that instantaneous thing. I can't even like things like I can see sometimes in person, like somebody just doesn't look super confident with it, or like they do a rep and then literally their face as they get out from under it.
Yeah.
Like the way they say, like they might say, you might be like, how'd that feel? And they're like, yeah, good. Yeah. And then you're like, what are you really saying? Like you can kind of like, you can read into a little bit more. So in person, in my opinion, is always better.
Yes.
And obviously we sell and do online coaching. So you might be sitting there like, what the fuck? These guys are just shitting on their own product. But no, we understand that they're like anything. There's pros and cons and there's limitations in anything. And it's about how do we make this thing work?
Yeah.
So in an online sense, we take a lot of videos, hopefully more than just the one, hopefully from different angles, from fronts and sides. We get people to leave notes on how things felt. Yep. Ideally, we give availability for them to do that, whether they always do. Even things like that we've spoken about a lot, like rating difficulty. So using RP, RIR, whatever tool you want to use, to give feedback on like how hard something felt, can be really powerful because when I'm looking at technique, I'm looking at how difficult it looks as well and multiple different aspects to that in correlation with what they're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at like what I'm seeing on the video versus what they're giving as far as feedback goes and what words they're using and what emotion they're conveying with it as well. So there's a lot that goes into this that isn't just like I'm looking at what angle your knee and your hip are at and that they're extending at the same rate or flexing at the same rate. That's part of it. But in isolation, it's only so useful. But online where we've got the video, we've got feedback, we've got the weights they're using, we've got the RP they're using, we've got multiple things of all those and as well.
We're trying to combine and gather as much data
to
as
make
we
it
can
as kind of in person as possible
within the constraints that we have available to us.
Yeah.
And there's been heaps of times where I've had clients who I'm like, hey, can you send me videos of this, this, and this? Plus, can you tell me what you thought of that?
Yeah.
On the day.
Yeah,
so do it
feel.
on the day. Yeah. So when you send me your squats this week, I want you to say, okay, set 1. This felt the best, or this was this, or I didn't really like this as much, blah, blah, blah. Because then sometimes they're just like, oh, I didn't even realize you really watched my videos. And I'm like, yes, we go through them and we're trying to marry up all of these things like I'm looking at videos and seeing, okay, was that an RPE 6? Did you nearly die halfway through the set? That's probably not an RPE 6. However, it's just trying to sort of get a better understanding of the person.
Yeah.
And what they think it might be. And then that's also another way for you to be able to teach someone, okay, this is how we gauge failure a little bit better.
Yeah.
This is other things that we can use. So then you like your coaching hat comes on and you can start to problem solve as to like, okay, how do we teach this? If this person clearly doesn't know how to use RPE, RR, whatever it might be, okay, this is how we can do that. Okay, this person doesn't really understand the technique advice that I've given them for this aspect. Cool. Well, let's see if this might work for them instead. Like it's just creating that understanding.
So yeah, that's part of this coaching thing is what we get how we're trying to use these multiple sources of income to come up multiple sources of input to come up with a solution to it. But there's multiple ways to change somebody's technique, to come up with a solution, to implement a solution for somebody when it comes to technique. It isn't just in the form of like, hey, do this cue, brace a little bit harder, squeeze your upper back a little bit tighter. Those things. They're definitely part of the solution. And these cues are, and finding the right cues for somebody is part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
We can also change how somebody moves and how they move closer to what we deem as good technique for whatever their goal is.
Yeah.
Via other methods. And the first one that pops in my mind is just giving the right exercise. So giving the right exercise for where they're at, what they're trying to achieve. Like I said before, the example might have been like giving a sports player whatever low bar back squat. Clearly not ideal, but in a powerlifting sense, to move, if that's the end goal, there's still, it doesn't mean that all these other ones are invalid. Like if somebody does have a lot of trouble with bracing, or they have trouble with a particular aspect of it, slowing it down, putting the bar in different positions, just giving them the right amount of sets and intensity across those sets, and allowing them to get good practice in is basically what I want.
Yes.
What I'm aiming for is, I don't want to say as many good reps as possible. I was about to, but I'm going to change that a little bit, because if you're just getting 100% perfect reps every time,
it's not heavy enough.
You're either being a wuss, or your coach is actually, in my opinion, undershooting you.
Yeah,
because you need a couple of wrong ones every now and then to learn what wrong is.
I actually had this conversation with a client the other day, because they were talking about like, oh, I haven't failed a deadlift in 18 months.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's great, phenomenal.
Yeah.
But on the contrary to that, have you been pushing yourself hard enough?
Yeah, it's not that sometimes we want them to fail. It's like,
no,
it's
absolutely
just getting a rep misgrooved every now and then.
That's what I was like saying to him, is like, I don't want you to go out and fail.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to get every deadlift for the rest of your life. But if you only ever get perfect deadlifts with perfect technique that never look like you struggle, and then all of a sudden one day you get to a comp and a weight's a little bit heavier, and you don't know how to grind it out, or you don't know how to sort of like adjust on the fly, like it's just not going to work. And it's the same with any of the lifts, really.
Well, programming is so tied to technique that it annoys me when people separate them completely, because it's not like, if I give you just a stupidly huge amount of sets for at an intensity that just isn't feasible for that amount of work, then of course, like, reps are going to start to break down, fatigue's going to come in, at some point it's going to get shitty.
Yes.
And if we just keep pushing beyond that point, we're probably teaching bad habits. We're probably actually like
adaptations.
Just no matter how many cues I've thrown at you and told you what perfect technique is and what I want, at that point you just can't hold it, and you're just practicing a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
I can't remember
it's just tied in. So
yeah,
together.
It is 100%. And I can't remember the exact like number, but there has been studies done on it that we were taught at uni with relation to like learning motor patterns. So not so much specifically with like strength and everything like that, but there's only a certain amount of like new learning that an individual can do within a certain time frame before things do start to dwindle. Like it's a fatigue thing obviously kicks in and everything like that.
Well, it's like what's the intensity at? There's so many factors to that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you can't just throw everything at them at once and go sink or swim.
Yeah.
It's like you just need to sort of slowly branch it up. You might start with 1 set week 1 or 1 to 2 sets, including their warm-ups.
Yeah, there's minimums
There's so
for
many
sure.
different ways to build it, but to ensure that this person's actually learning the way you want them to learn.
Yeah, not that we're having a discussion about volume, but that to me is
No.
what volume is. Is like, how do I find the right amount of volume? Like, I've seen posts that say like there's a linear relationship and more is better essentially, but not. I disagree, because like at some point, this is like what I've just said, like the technique, or like not even just technique, but like the amount of, like, let's just say, so we don't have to go into too much detail, like good work that you can do is finite based on the intensity and based on like your skill set and lots of things. The ideal amount of volume for somebody to do is where that is no longer feasible based on intensity or based on their skill or based on the variation or based on the rest of the days that they're doing, based on their job. So like volume, all these volume studies that you see in my eyes are just like, yeah, good information, but like a load of crap, essentially. Like once you've coached enough people, the amount of good volume is what they can do.
So subjective.
Is so, which is really annoying of an answer, but it is what it is. Minimum dose is what I am always going for to get the outcome that we want. But anyway, completely different discussion.
One for a different day.
But yeah, on tech, technique is tied into all those different ideas that we just spoke about, as well as our formal feedback and cueing, and all those things in conjunction are going to allow us to give feedback in an online sense. Now, how we actually do it, we've listed obviously getting videos and thoughts and feedback from people, and then taking that and compiling that information and giving them feedback through cues, giving them feedback whether they know it or not through altering exercise variations, programming, as in sets and reps and intensity and all this stuff. All this stuff is inherently guiding your technique, whether you know it or not. It's a little bit more tied in together than what some people think. When clients think technique feedback, they think me telling you how to do the squat better. But really, it's all these things that guide you in the right path to getting the right technique.
Yeah. I think one of the simplest ones, like, so people have a bit of an example of that. If you want to use squat as an example, and you have someone who comes in and they just bomb the squat, drop, lose tension, try and bounce out of the pocket. Like, you don't even need to turn around sometimes and tell that person, oh, that's bad technique, do this, this, and this. It could be something so simple as like just add in a tempo. Couple of seconds down with a pause. And then all of a sudden, their technique turns from crap to actually somewhat good, because all of a sudden they're just being more mindful of what they're doing through that movement, and they can think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, and then after you've got it down, maybe you've allowed an opportunity to think out the details with that tempo. You take that tempo away.
Yeah,
and they can go fast, but with holding things.
To be able to move fast, you need to be able to move well.
Yeah,
if you're not moving well, it's just a clusterfuck.
Yeah, but you can go back to practicing fast.
Yeah, you can absolutely. You can go back to absolutely. Once you learn how to move well, you've got to walk before you can run.
Anything else that we've missed as far as like what we, I guess, like us at Nexus and stuff would be like through Loom videos.
I think the big one for us is Loom videos,
which essentially kind of attempts in a way, not quite as good, but attempts to make it more in person, as in like, here's you doing a squat, and then on the video of us, we can demonstrate it. We can have
demonstrate, draw.
Yeah, have a couple.
Big one for me is I draw on them. So there's a little pencils and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it might
on
be
videos.
On the videos. Sorry. So on the Loom, it could be something as simple as like, if I'm trying to get someone to do an RDL in a specific way, and maybe their hips are moving one way, and I want them to kind of move a different way, I'll quite literally, like, I can draw arrows, or I can draw like, hey, this is where you're currently at. This is where we kind of want you to be.
Just talking over it.
Just as like a visual cue, talking over it. You can demonstrate it yourself. I know I've seen you do it hundreds of times, where you'll be like, hey, can you quickly film this for me? I've got to send a client a video. And it's you doing the video.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, we may not be able to be there in person demonstrating, but we can sure as hell try our best to show that person what we're trying to look
make it. Yeah.
Like, we try and make it as close to in person as we can through an online platform, because, as you said, like, we both have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of people each, and know how important some of these things can be. Whereas if it was just like, written feedback every week of like, okay, do this, Things get so lost in translation.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes. Yeah, definitely. The only, like, I've just got a couple of notes here. The only like dot point that I have left is less about like what we do and more about just a bit of a training fallacy, and it goes almost back to your broomstick thing, but I understand that's a completely different situation. It's just like nobody likes training light, and does it work anyway? So like I just think the concept of taking somebody who's maybe messed up a really heavy squat, say it's a 3-rep set with a weight that they could use their 5 RM or something, so 2 reps from failure, and then going like, this, we had this breakdown and that breakdown, let's just go back to a much lighter weight where there's a lot more reps in the tank and just do that. I feel like it has some merit, but everything does. Everything has pros and cons. So, but in my opinion, is a potentially missing out because weight technique under heavier weights is different to really lightweight.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we can, my opinion would be, I still want, I just think about when I train, like I just like doing fucking warm up weights for sets and reps. Sometimes is just shit. I still program it every now and then in certain circumstances where people need it, but most of the time, like, it's just not fun.
No.
And it just takes away, like, it just makes a task that you do for fun and training a thing that you do because you enjoy it and you just want to get better at it. And that's why you've hired us, and you've just made it fucking shit.
Yeah.
For most people. Most people just don't want to do light weights.
No.
And so giving them a better start position or a couple of cues or giving them an exercise which they can still go really hard on, but they're held back by a tempo or a variation that I've given them. It still can go really, really hard, but is going to teach them the thing that I'm trying to teach them.
Yeah.
Is a much more fun way going about it. So
absolutely.
or just getting their quads stronger might change their technique. And if you know biomechanics and stuff a little bit more, maybe you can use that to your advantage and get that to affect technique down the line. So I don't know. I just try to make technique ingrained in hard training as opposed to like trying to teach somebody technique through light training.
No, 100%. And that's like, if anyone's ever come and done a technique pack with me or wants to come and do a technique pack with me, one of the things that I teach them and tell them straight away is I'm like, okay, cool. This is great. Like, I can teach you technique when you've got 40 kilo deadlift on the bar. Not a problem. But one thing I'll always do is start to ramp the load in the session with them, because I'm like, I'm actually looking for breakdown.
Yeah.
Within, I don't want someone to fucking
RPE
12. But I'm like, I want to see what happens if we take this 40 kilos to 80 kilos to 100 kilos.
Mm.
We're going to cap it at 100, but I want to see what sort of shifts over this time. And then we start to work with that. And then that person will be like, okay, cool. When they're doing a 100 kilo deadlift versus a 40 kilo deadlift, like, this little shift might change. And then you're just kind of trying to keep them on that track of like, okay, remember when we're doing this, we want this. Nothing changes for this. Mm. And then they'll go and do it and nail it. And they're like, oh, that's great. Like, that felt the best it's ever felt. And you're like, yep, perfect.
Cool. Yeah.
Like, you need to spend a bit of that time with that heavy stuff. Otherwise, it's just never going to really get anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I would much rather like pull back volume, change the exercise variation or whatever, rather than just making shit easy for the sake of
kind of running away from it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a time and a place. And that place is not typically somebody who's like healthy and in a comp prep and needs a lot of confidence under heavyweights.
No.
Any other notes you had?
That was all the notes I had.
Any other like myths or like just different methods around teaching technique that are out there that you've seen or you've heard?
A really funny one that I've seen some coaches do is they'll live Zoom.
Okay.
In session.
Yep. I can see validity behind it.
I can definitely see some validity. I think there's definitely some merit to it, depending on the individual and what you're trying to achieve.
I've done it a couple of times, but fuck, it's rare. Yeah.
I've done it once with a client, and that was because they were just like, okay, I'm doing my things then out, and I was like, you know what? I got a spare 5 minutes. Put me on Zoom so I can watch. Or it was actually.
But you're still only getting one view. You're not getting
exactly. That
view.
was the issue. Is I was like, okay, cool. So put the camera here. Okay, cool. I need you to move the camera here now. Can you actually just move it there?
Mm.
And it was like, yeah, that's great.
Videos.
Yeah, the only extra benefit to that was it was right there and then.
Yeah, you could
and they
say
had
the
the feedback there.
Yeah.
So although, there could be some
Yeah.
practical aspect to it. Not something I will generally ever do.
Yeah.
But I have seen it done.
Yeah.
And have done it myself.
I don't know. I'm pretty happy with that we've covered off, in our opinion, like what online coaching is, how we do it, first of all, how we can change somebody's technique online, and
how we define technique.
How we define it, to actually be able to give feedback. Because just feedback to without an end goal is kind of like pointless. Or, and kind of in person versus online as well.
Yeah.
So that's a good little roundup of our thoughts between all that. If anybody is in the Gold Coast or Townsville, more than happy to assess people's technique via free, really, essentially, for a once-off session. Come in, we'll have a look over you. I'm more than happy to do that. Even if you've heard this and you thought you were pretty sound in your technique, but maybe you've thought, hey, fuck, maybe I could, maybe there's more to this.
Yep.
We're both happy to give like a free online technique assessment.
Yeah,
I actually through a couple of videos.
I was about to say, I love when people do that. I've had a couple of people reach out to me and be like, "Hey, man, like I know you don't coach me, but," and I'm like, "Yeah, sweet dude, like send it through."
Yeah,
like I've had a couple of boys send me some deadlift videos, and they're like, "Is there anything that you could see that I could work on?" And I'd just be like, "Yep, why don't you just try this, this, and this?" And then they'll come back to me like, "Oh man, that helped heaps. Like that was great."
Yeah.
It's like cool.
As long as you're not doing it every week.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If it becomes weekly, I'll send you a form and you can sign up to coaching. If it's like a once-off thing and you just sort of like a little bit stuck in something that you're doing at that point in time,
more than happy to help.
Please send it through.
Yeah,
like, we're happy to help.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Cool. Leave it there.
Lovely.
Thank you for listening to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. Be sure to jump on our website to find details on everything mentioned in the podcast today. Plus, information on our coaching, mentoring, and gyms based in the Gold Coast and Townsville. Make sure you follow us on our Instagram for any updates on what we are currently doing, and we'll see you all in the next episode.